was early morning on the freezing and damp lands of northern France on October 25th, 1415. Rain had fallen steadily throughout the night, turning the freshly plowed fields near the village of Agincourt into thick, clinging mud. On this muddy ground, two armies stood face to face, ready to clash fiercely. The English, exhausted and hungry after weeks of grueling marching, and the French, confident and numbering nearly 3 times the English, fielded a massive army. At the head of the English army stood King Henry V, only 29 years old. His face bore a scar from the Battle of Shrewsbury 12 years earlier. That summer, he had invaded France and captured the port of Harfleur in Normandy. But disease and exhaustion had ravaged and worn out his army. Hundreds had already perished. As winter approached, Henry made a bold decision. He would march his diminished army north toward the English-held port of Calais. He hoped to reach safety and to demonstrate that English power ran deep, even in enemy territory. The French, fresh and overconfident, had pursued him and blocked the path to the port. Henry now faced 2 choices: surrender or fight. With great courage, he chose to fight. On the morning of Agincourt, Henry commanded about 6,000 men, roughly 5,000 long-range archers and 1,000 men-at-arms. Many were veterans, disciplined and hardened by hardship. They carried longbows nearly 6 feet tall, capable of shooting arrows up to 230 meters, each tipped with iron. Facing them was a French army of around 20,000, composed of the finest of French nobility. Heavy cavalry, gleaming men-at-arms, and armored knights filled the muddy fields, confident they would defeat the smaller English force. Among the French commanders were Constable Charles d'Albret, Duke John I of Alençon, and Jean Liangre Boucicaut. Their ranks were filled with nobles seeking glory, ransom, and revenge for years of English raids on their lands. The battlefield lay between 2 small woodlands, Traumacourt and Enort, creating a natural bottleneck that limited the French numerical advantage. Henry immediately recognized the potential of the terrain. He deployed his men in a long single line, men-at-arms in the center, with longbowmen on both sides planting sharpened stakes in the ground to stop the French cavalry. The French, confident in their superior numbers, completely ignored strategy. At dawn, the English knelt and kissed the muddy earth. Henry rode along the lines, wearing his helmet and surcoat bearing the arms of England and France. He spoke to his men in both English and French, urging them to stand firm and be brave. Hours passed as both sides waited carefully. The French expected Henry to attack, but he did not. Henry realized that the French had sufficient supplies and could simply starve the English into surrender. He could not wait any longer. Finally, he gave the order to advance toward the enemy and initiated the battle. When the English halted, the archers planted their stakes again. Then the command rang out, "Loose!" The sky darkened with arrows. Longbowmen fired continuously, 5 to 6 arrows per minute. The shafts fell on the French front ranks. Horses screamed, knights fell, and formations began to break. The French heavy cavalry struggled through the mud, their armor growing heavier with clinging clay. Horses stumbled and threw riders to the ground, yet arrows continued to rain down. When the French cavalry reached the English line, their horses were exhausted and their formations disordered. The English longbowmen, protected by stakes, continued to unleash deadly fire. Many knights were crushed under their own panicked, fleeing horses. Eventually, the French cavalry began to retreat. With the cavalry broken, the French commander sent forward men-at-arms and armored infantry. Moving through mud and heavy armor was extremely difficult. Even though heavily armored, the French soldiers were vulnerable to arrows striking their arms, legs, and the eye slits of their helmets. When the French reached the English men-at-arms, despite their numerical advantage, they pushed back Henry's center. Archers on the flanks continued their fire, and the battle balanced on a knife's edge. Here came Henry's brilliant move. The longbowmen on the flanks, still armed, surrounded the French and rained death upon the sides of their armored infantry. When they ran out of arrows, they dropped their bows and charged directly into the melee, attacking from unexpected directions. The surrounded French were trapped and utterly helpless. The battle was chaotic and suffocating. Shoulder to shoulder, the French could barely use their swords and axes effectively. Knights fell, and those behind trampled over them. The mud swallowed soldiers whole. Henry fought in the very heart of the battle. At one point, the Duke of Alençon struck the king's crown and dented it. Henry's guards killed the Duke, and the king continued to fight, rallying his men. By midday, the French assault had collapsed. Thousands of soldiers lay dead or wounded. Many nobles and knights were slain. Constable Charles d'Albret, Dukes Alençon and Brabant, and countless others. English longbowmen swarmed over the wounded, taking prisoners or killing them. However, when a false report arrived that French forces were attacking from the rear, Henry, fearing his exhausted army could not withstand another attack, ordered all prisoners executed. Hundreds of captives, many highborn, were killed. The remaining French forces retreated completely demoralized. French casualties numbered around 6,000 to 10,000. English losses were about 600. The victory at Agincourt was astounding for the English. Henry's small, exhausted army had destroyed a far larger enemy through discipline, use of terrain, and the deadly power of the longbow. This battle cemented Henry's reputation as one of England's greatest warrior kings. Thank you for watching. For more stories of legendary battles and the moments that shaped history, remember to like and subscribe.